Welcome everyone. We're excited to have you all here today for our new Standard for Compliance training webinar. Before we begin, we have just a few housekeeping items to go over. The session is being recorded and the recording will be included in thank you email to be shared tomorrow. All participants are muted and in listen-only mode, and we look forward to your questions and we'll have time to answer them throughout the session as well as during the dedicated time allotted for Q&A at the end. So please feel free to submit your questions at any time or enter them into the chat to be answered. And with that, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Natalie Pulsifer, Senior Director at the Institute for Financial Integrity. I lead our client services team and oversee the delivery of our e-learning and instructor-led training programs. I've worked in the industry for almost 10 years now, and I'm very excited to be here and share the trends and insights that we've received from clients over the years.
All right, thank you so much, Natalie, and thank you everyone so much for joining us. So I'll give a little bit about me. It's actually a lot of it, so I just want to preface by saying, how excited we are for this. I've been in the corporate learning space for 16 years now, and in my career, I've had the amazing chance to work on all the elements that go into releasing training programs: instructional design, graphic design, casting and video production, e-learning development, content writing and editing, quality assurance, LMS administration, the joys of SCORM and AICC and XAPI, and logistics for instructor-led programs. I've been involved in the delivery in some capacity or another of hundreds of e-learning courses and tests, as well as large instructor-led and blended programs. And throughout my entire career, I have always gotten particularly excited, and you'll see I still do, when working on compliance programs, because it's an opportunity to wow. Everyone loves a good before and after. And when it comes to compliance programs, you'll see, as we're going to talk about in a little bit, it's a real chance to delight users with a refreshing experience. I've been on the training provider side as well as on the internal L&D side. In particular, on the training provider side, where we sit now, we get an invaluable lens into what organizations are currently doing, the pain points they're currently experiencing. And I can tell you the pain points the industry was talking about 16 years ago are still the same. Despite advances in technology, despite new tools coming out, in fact, I would say they've been exacerbated, which we'll talk about shortly, and compounded upon. Typically at IFI, we run webinars on subject matter. For example, next week we have experts from K2 Integrity joining us to discuss the FATF mutual valuation process. But as a learning professional, I'm a believer in lifelong learning, and I always try to continuously improve and learn something new. So I regularly join webinars put on by training providers on best practices and tips and tricks, and they are always fluff. I joined one a couple months ago. The agenda was amazing. It was all about rethinking training, how it's time we did things differently. And when I joined in hopes of at least one golden nugget, it was anything but different. It was the same fluff that gets recycled over and over, and I learned nothing during that hour. So I had enough, and I came back to the team and I said, give Natalie and I a slot in the calendar, because it's time we spoke up and held our own webinar where we could talk about real problems and real tangible solutions. Training development is what we live and breathe at IFI, and we love what we do. So we're very excited for today's discussion. We appreciate all of you joining and taking the time. Time is precious. We want to make sure you get the most out of this. So please do submit questions on the right-hand panel in the Q&A area. And any pain points you're currently experiencing, add them into the chat so we can problem solve together. We've left quite a bit of time for questions, as we typically run out of time to get to them all. So if you don't have any questions, we'll end early, but we do hope to hear from you. And you can contribute in the chat anonymously if that makes you more comfortable. We just want this to be as productive a session as possible for you all. So let's get this party started. We're going to start off by acknowledging the reality that most of you already know, but many are still struggling to solve. Employees are tired of compliance training. They have been for a long time. And frankly, training administrators And compliance leaders, like a lot of you, are frustrated too. For years, organizations have invested heavily in mandatory learning programs designed to reduce risk and satisfy regulatory expectations. But despite all that effort, many employees experience compliance training as repetitive, disconnected from their work, designed primarily to simply check a box. We hear that a lot. And the data here, we pulled some just key stats from recent studies. You can tell tells a pretty concerning story. Gallup found that only 23% of employees rated their compliance training experience as excellent. In that same study, and even more concerning, only 1 in 10 employees, so 10%, agreed the training actually changed how they do their work. When employees don't see relevance, engagement drops quickly. A recent Talent LMS survey found that 45% of employees believe compliance training is disconnected from real workplace situations, that it's just theory, it's just definitions, it's just awareness. And employees describe traditional programs as generic, long, and focused on completion rather than behavior change. And it's not just an employee perception problem, which we're going to talk about how we tackle that. Compliance leaders, learning administrators like you all are also dissatisfied with the current state of the industry, focusing on completion rates, acknowledgments, audit documentation, but struggling to prove actual effectiveness, retention of knowledge, culture impact, or any real risk reduction. In other words, we're all spending an enormous amount of time and money on programs that employees often dislike, and leaders themselves don't fully trust are working. So that's created what many organizations are now calling compliance training fatigue. And one of my favorite pieces of stats up here on the screen is this aggregate web scraping data. Basically, aside from formal studies, they're finding that on online forums that are informal, that are anonymous, employees are admitting, like high majority, 80% are admitting they just click through. You know, they click through the training, they multitask during courses, they rush to finish the requirements, and then they forget the content shortly afterwards. And this is compliance training fatigue. So the challenge for compliance teams, those that are releasing and developing compliance training, is not simply delivering the training, it's designing experiences that are relevant, practical, engaging, memorable, and capable, at the end of the day, helping employees to make better decisions in real situations. So that's what we're going to focus on today. The way we're going to structure this is by talking about key pain points, and then how we're tackling them, design strategies to improve learner engagement while still meeting the regulatory and organizational requirements. So I'm going to hand it on over to Natalie as head of our client services. She has a great perspective on what we're seeing.
Yes, so before we dive in, I want to walk through what we're really seeing in the field and what our clients are telling us. We've identified 11 key challenges that organizations face when it comes to compliance training, and we're going to briefly touch on them now and then go into each one in a little bit more depth as we work through. So all of these challenges fall into a few broad categories. Across the top, we have the regulatory pressures. These have come up more and more over the past couple of years. Then in the middle row, we have probably the most the most common suspects, the subpar user experience, the perception, the engagement. And then on the bottom, we have challenges that are related to resources, capacity, and administrative clarity. I'm sure most of you recognize probably a few of these from your own training experiences. Feel free to drop in the chat if any of them you've been faced with most often, if there's any others that you see when you take training at work, but these are the most common challenges that we've seen when we've been speaking with clients. And now we're going to dive into each of them in a bit more detail. So let's start with the regulatory side of things. Looking at these 3 challenges, the requirements on the regulatory side are not only increasing, but they're shifting. Regulators are moving away from simply asking organizations, did your employees complete the required AML and sanctions training, to asking questions like, can you prove that the training was effective, or that it was risk aligned, or can you prove that it was role-based training? And so these questions we receive on a regular basis from all of our clients when they're looking to develop their annual training programs. And at the same time, the threat landscape is constantly evolving. So whether it's new evasion typologies, sanctions, emerging technologies like AI, geopolitical risks, all of these changes are happening at a pace that's faster than ever. And it means that training can't be static, and it must be tailored to our clients' businesses, their products and services, their procedures, and their teams. So I'll hand it over to Lauren to discuss how we solve for these challenges.
Yes, so this is something we get a lot on when it comes to, we see clients that they're releasing 34 training programs annually. And it's just, it started, and year after year after year, oh, we have to cover this now. Oh, we moved into this market, we need to cover this now. And it's just compounded and become unwieldy. And as a result, a lot of folks are taking things they don't need to be taking. Some folks are missing out on things that they need to be taking, but in general, a lot of employees are taking so much training, a lot of which isn't necessarily relevant to them. So what we are recommending at this point, and this is what a lot of regulators require now, is a formal training needs assessment. So what does that mean? That means you are taking a step back. You're not, it's so easy to get into the weeds and just focus on, okay, this is all the training we've been delivering year after year. We need to do it again this year, re-release everything. Here's the deadlines. It's taking a step back and saying, okay, let's create a competency matrix. Let's, in Excel, for example, pull together all of our regulatory requirements, map it against our organizational structure, right? Who are our key audiences? This is often first line, second line, third line, board and senior management, executive level. What are our risks, right? It all needs to go back to the risk assessment. What are your unique organizational risks? That could be based on specific regions. It could be based on specific topics or products that you're offering. And then mapping it out and saying, okay, who needs to cover what? And then you can transition that into a training framework where you're saying, okay, here are our key audiences at the firm, and here's the key topics that they need to be aware of, and also according to knowledge level. Do they need high level awareness of this? Do they need deep, in-depth knowledge? And then you translate that to a training calendar. So you start mapping it out according to the whole year. So this is important because over time, everything has just gotten so complex, right? We need to take a step back, and we need to kind of break things up in a way that makes sense for our audiences. This is where you're going to get your role-based training map from. This is where you're going to get your risk-aligned training from. It has to start with this competency matrix. But I'd like to mention, this training needs assessment, it does not need to be outsourced. Sure, we do this all the time and we help clients with this, but there is no regulatory expectation that a third party conduct this. They do not care about who performs it. What they care about is training needs are properly identified based on role, risk, and regulatory obligation. The methodology is documented, it's consistent, and it's risk-based. And that at the end of the day, staff are receiving appropriate and timely training, and that you have effective oversight and governance over this training program. Certain regulators do expect it to be owned by the firm's compliance, HR, or risk function, but it really just needs to be aligned with your regulatory risk assessments, periodically reviewed and updated, and supported by audit or independent testing functions. So we do have clients that come to us for help, of course, if it's a new company standing up training, or it's a business expanding into a new market and the team doesn't know what they don't know. But this can 100% be done internally. So this is the first step, rather than when, having just being reactive when something new comes out. It really needs to all go back to this training needs assessment and this framework and this calendar.
So now when it comes to the subpar user experience, I'm sure we've all at least had one, whether it's scrolling through a PDF or clicking slide by slide by slide for over an hour. Even the most accurate or well-researched training content will fall flat if it has a poor user experience. And this is without a doubt one of the most common challenges that we've seen clients have come to us for over the years. Historically, as Lauren mentioned, compliance training has been seen as a check the box exercise with training that looks outdated, or it could be hard to navigate, or it just feels like it was, thrown together last minute. And employees notice. So when employees notice this, they're immediately turned off before they've even started or before they've even gotten through it. And so I'll hand it over to Lauren now to talk about how we solve for this type of challenge.
So I feel like, yes, regulatory requirements, regulatory expectations, risks, like they're all important. All your programs need to be grounded in that. But at the end of the day, the user experience, I mean, it really is paramount. It's what really, really matters. We have a lot of things listed on here. These are just things that I'm going to walk through one by one. But basically, why are you releasing a training, right? Their e-learning programs, instructor-led programs, they're all developed to solve a variety of needs. But compliance programs in particular, they contain vital information for employees to ensure they understand key concepts as well as their individual role and responsibilities as it pertains to the subject. So it's even more important to be putting a lot more thought and care into the design to make sure that the user experience is resonating with them. They're getting it. So first off, graphic design and branding. Now, I've heard people say, oh, that's just putting lipstick on a pig. It's not. Designing the look and feel of the user interface and all the graphics within the program to be aligned to your corporate branding guidelines, it not only adds a layer of polish and credibility, it is signaling as soon as they open it up, oh, this isn't just some generic training. This is made for me. This is made for my company. And it enables you to also then, which we'll talk about a little bit later, extend core messages and compliance initiatives outside of the formal training experience. There are visual cues, there are colors, there are themes that can be incorporated and, trigger recall of these key concepts that are critical to compliant behaviors. So graphic design and branding is very important. And it's something that we do all the time. While we have an off-the-shelf suite of courses, we often recommend, we've purposely designed them to be neutral, but then we often recommend, okay, let's add all of your design elements into it. Let's add actual pictures of your offices, of your people, showing, okay, this is for me, this is for my team. Navigation. I, have seen it all. And I talked before about everyone loves a good before and after. Navigation for compliance training programs, I'm sure you all have seen something similar, but it used to be real estate of about, 4 inches by 3 inches on screen. And the UX would be just simply next, a linear experience. And it is typically locked down. And sometimes it requires people to, actually listen and for audio on screen to finish before they can even progress. It's basically painful, and it's reinforcing this, I'm going to hit next, and just kind of clicking through. There are new tools out there. A lot of you are already using them, which is such a pleasure to see as, more and more clients are embracing these newer tools. Like, for example, Articulate. Yes, Articulate Rise has the scrolling. It's built to be more like a typical online experience. And, there is branching capabilities. There is the ability to configure things so things can be locked down, things can be optional. And then Articulate has Storyline, which is that real estate, but it does scale. But it has a lot more functionality to be basically opening up navigation for adult learners, right? Letting people explore. So that's something that's key. As soon as people see everything is especially locked down for duration, like you must spend 2 minutes on each slide, it's not required from a regulatory perspective. Why was that ever put in place in the first place? I don't know, but it has developed this very negative perception. So it's important that you have modern scrolling navigation for a lot of programs. Next thing is a pretest. So there are some folks at firms that have been there 10, 20, 30 years. They have been taking the exact same program every single year, right? You have to take AML every year. You have to recertify. Give them a chance for annual compliance programs to to test out, to show their proficiency. If they do not get the required score, then they have to take the full course. But if they get 100%, if they get 90%, if they get 80%, whatever the mastery score is, let them test out, because time is precious. And for those tenured employees that have been on, time is expensive as well to the company. So, and that is 100% satisfying regulatory expectations. If someone has been at the firm for 10, 20 years and they are able to test out of a basic AML program they have to take every single year and they get 100%, that is 100% satisfactory. So we often will recommend for annual training programs a pre-test that allows to test out. And then what a positive experience. They go in 1 year and it's like, oh, we can see your stuff, get back to work. No need to do anything further. The other piece, opening up a program, is senior endorsement. So having the program open with a message from senior management, it could be a video, it could be a written letter, it could be an auto snippet, but it really adds credibility and engages employees from the outset. Again, it's saying this program is updated, it's relevant to my firm, and senior management has spent the time to do this, so I should be spending time as well. It tells them senior management is behind the program, signals the content's up to date and relevant to their specific company and role. And if video production doesn't fit into the budget, even though nowadays you can take a beautiful video with just an iPhone, there are other options. So we really love having senior endorsement upfront in the program wherever we can get it in. The next point would be updated content. So obviously, a lot of mandatory training programs are typically assigned on an annual basis, and employees are viewing the same trainings year after year with very little variation. This, as we discussed, can result in them switching on autopilot as soon as they begin. So we like to open up programs after senior endorsement with breaking news. What's the latest fines that have been hitting on this topic, right? What are the latest enforcement actions? It could be news headlines on fines for noncompliance, but throughout the content, you can be signaling to the learner that the content is updated and the consequences are serious by calling out recent news. And that really encourages their full attention and makes them, sit up a little bit straighter. And it also helps them to recall, oh yeah, I heard about that. And so we like to, on an annual basis, be looking at our content and including current events, current news, as a way to help them to engage more. Final attestation. This is literally the check the box, but it also does have a layer of accountability that it adds. When you're asking employees to confirm they completed the program, they understand the content, and they will adhere to the associated policies, that actually creates an emotional connection and a sense of accountability. So we do recommend that. And then a final test, right? We want to validate employee understanding of core concepts. But the reason why this is included under user experience is because these questions need to matter. They can't just be, what's the definition of money laundering? What is the 3 stages of money laundering? Placement, layering, integration. No, it needs to be about something that matters to them in their day-to-day. Remember, they're going to be taking a lot of this on an annual basis. They will have seen a lot of this. I remember I took a course in a previous life, and it was on, data protection, cybersecurity awareness. And one of the final questions, I'll never forget it. It was literally something like, if you have confidential documents that have been printed, should you leave them, leave them on your desk for anyone to see, B, leave them in the copier for anyone to see, C, show them to others, or D, dispose of them in the proper way by shredding them in the allocated area, blah, blah, blah. And there's also things with questions like, a lot of times all the wrong answers are short and the long answer is longer, things like that. The right answer is longer, rather. These questions need to be thoughtful. They need to be focusing on the gray area, not an easy yes or no, not an easy true or false, not, easy, obvious answer options. It needs to be focusing on the gray area where it's like, let me think about that. What would I be doing in this situation? So we've listed final test there, and it should be not difficult, but meaningful. And then resources. So be sure to include, any downloadable policy documents for later reference, a PDF takeaway of key terms, a listing of internal contacts, links to internal sites, hotlines. Basically, the quicker employees can access the information they need when they need it, the better. So we always like to take key takeaways, provide them for download within the course with a friendly message saying, be sure to download this so you have it handy. And that also helps to extend the learning outside of the formal course experience. A certificate of completion. This is just a nice way of showing I completed this. Having even senior management, and this might sound a bit, the word cheesy isn't right, but having senior management have certificates of completion printed and up, it just continues to signal the importance of values, the importance of, having participated in these training programs and that they value them. But in general, folks love to get a certificate of completion and the ability to share it on sites like LinkedIn or have it as a badge within the internal LMS system. All of that, it encourages continuous learning. And then CPE credits. So this is something that is really never done, and it's not that difficult. So depending on your firm, some firms do, endorse specific accreditations, industry accreditations, right? The alphabet soups of CFP, CAPM, CPM, all of that, CPA. What you can be doing to show, a competitive differentiator for your employees and a benefit to the organization is as you prove your staff has the necessary skills and experience to perform in their roles, basically consider seeking approval for CPE credits with professional organizations. This increases the value add for your employees. Many designations and certifications that they have require annual completion of regulatory and ethics content. So your organization's compliance program can easily fulfill, continuing professional requirements for your employees. And then they typically have to pay for that out of pocket if their company doesn't reimburse them. So this just adds an additional layer of value to think about. And then the final piece is a feedback loop, right? A lot of organizations have surveys that they do saying, how did we do on the training? Oh, how could we do things better? And it's really important to do that because mandatory training has always been top down from the organization to the employees. The organization saying, in your role, you must complete these. And then the employees go in and take it. And to be able to have it be not only that push, but a little bit of the pull, having, more of a two-way street, in your surveys or, in any sort of communications that you're putting out there seeking feedback, you then, in the next time you roll it out, you say, we asked you, you told us what you want, we heard you, and we've implemented changes. So look out for shorter content or more frequency and not just an annual requirement, for example, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. But whatever the feedback is or content that they want to be learning more about or anything like that, letting them know we heard you and we're now implementing that. So really establishing that, making it a loop and not kind of in a vacuum. So I know that's a lot, but that is some of the thoughtful design elements that you can be putting in place when you're looking at your programs and, a little bit of a checklist to think. And not all of these are going to be relevant for every single program. Every single program will be a little bit different and the audience will be a little bit different. So it should be tailored. But for this in particular, for your larger annual mandatory programs, we see this works very well. Now we'll move on to the next.
Yeah, thank you. So looking at negative perception and training fatigue, these are probably some of my favorite challenges to solve for. And they're also two common challenges that directly feed into each other. So negative perception typically stems from how compliance training, has been positioned historically. We've said it time and time again already on this, during the session. It's been framed as a mandatory check the box exercise, something that employees have to do, not something that was meaningfully designed for them or that intentionally benefits them in any way. And so it's very hard to build engagement. And on the other hand, you have training fatigue, which tends to build more over time. So employees are hit annually with multiple courses at once, at least an hour or more in duration. They have tight timelines to do it. And then on top of that, they're receiving very repetitive content, typically year after year. And when doing all that, they begin to disengage. And the long durations and the lack of variety tends to create a cycle that can be really hard to break. And it makes employees dread compliance training before they've started it. And that mindset really does affect how they absorb and ultimately retain the material. So I'll hand it over to Lauren now to discuss how to solve for these challenges.
Yes. So basically, a lot of what we see happening is, an organization has spent months developing a new training program. And then when it comes time to release it, it is a simple email, plain text. The subject is something like, training requirement, deadline approaching, and it is plain text. There might be some red text in there, might be some highlighted text in there that basically is saying, you have a new training program assigned to you, you need to take it. And then the employee sees it, they just file it away. They're like, oh, I'll worry about it when I need to worry about it. I have a month, for example. A few weeks later, another email comes through, and this is saying, training reminder, 1 week left, and then overdue. And, you have these, several emails that are being pushed out and with increasing urgency. We encourage rethinking how all of these programs are communicated. Think of the effort that you're going into developing these programs. That same amount of effort should be in the communication campaign. If you're a part of L&D team, HR team, compliance team, your clients are your employees. And think about, as an organization, how you are communicating to your external clients. Beautifully branded emails, HTML designed emails, the website that you have, like all of that. Start reframing, thinking of, okay, this is how I need to also start communicating internally. It doesn't take much effort to be designing beautiful emails. We worked with one team where it was the internal legal and compliance team. And they said, we really we believe in this. We want to be communicating to our employees with the same level of polish. And it also signals the importance of the program and that it is customized. They not only redid all their email campaigns, but they also created signature banners. They created an editorial calendar for the whole year on different compliance themes. So the branding and design of communications is an easy win, an easy way to get people to kind of sit up straighter and say, oh, okay, this is different. This isn't the usual. But then also, when it comes to delivery, thinking about the frequency. I mentioned this one client we had that had 34 training programs. They were delivered every single year in February, and everyone had 30 days to complete it. And their rationale was, oh, everyone can complete one a day. And we're like, hold up here. This is overwhelming. This is daunting. And so we took a step back, just like during the training needs assessment, and we created a calendar for the year. And we said, okay, yes, the core pieces need to be set up front, but then little by little, almost like a drip feed throughout the year, let's have broken up according to monthly themes, yearly themes. Let's mix up the training modalities. It shouldn't all be e-learning. It shouldn't all be instructor-led. It should be a blend. We should, have some micro-learning in there, and basically curating this editorial calendar that's also across channels. It can be videos released. It can be, micro sessions or webinars that people can join throughout the year and talk about different topics. So really rethinking, taking a step back, rethinking the delivery throughout the year according to themes and having it all be branded. This helps to change the perception from being an all at once, daunting task that is pushed off. And it also helps keep compliance top of mind. And this is how you develop, and we always hear compliance culture. Basically, it should be living and breathing, changing all the time, updates all the time. And that might sound overwhelming, but when you revisit durations and modalities, it can be just a regular part of business, just SOP, not an annual thing, but a daily thing, as it should be. So this is what we see work well. And this is what we see help with actual completion rates, right? When it comes to, okay, everyone is completing the day before the deadline and a little bit past, we're seeing, oh, now the perception has changed to, oh, this isn't going to be such a big deal. I can take care of this right now. And we're seeing it done sooner to when it is the assignment date. And training fatigue comes from all this. Just it's a bit of perception, as Natalie said, they feed into each other, but we want things short and sweet and easy to remember and easy to access, and throughout the year. So that's really how we're seeing things improve from a user experience, user perception perspective. Also, the chat and Q&A is, let's see.
We have one question.
Oh, okay.
About free
time. I was gonna say, please, I don't know if we're just talking into cyberspace, if any of this is resonating with any of you. I hope so. This is what we hear day in, day out from our clients, and how we work with them to solve these problems. So if you have anything to contribute, please add it in. But we will proceed.
All right, so let's look at the lack of admin clarity and lack of senior management buy-in. Again, these are two challenges that typically go hand in hand. So one of the top questions that we get asked when a client comes to us looking for training is, how can they measure ROI? Without a doubt, it's always a top question. And we can track, of course, the completion rates, the assessment scores, duration, how much time they spent in a course, but there's really little visibility into whether the employees are actually understanding the material, or if there's any knowledge gaps that are still there after the training's delivered. So it makes it nearly impossible for teams to build the business case for senior management. And if the leadership can't see the connection between the training and meaningful outcomes, then the program loses internal visibility and the support that it needs to really be effective. So we have come up with obviously ways to solve for this, which Lauren can go through now.
So yes, every time we onboard and kick off with a new client, the first thing they focus on, which is the right questions, is how are we going to measure success, right? What are our key points, right? Our key performance indicators for this program, because that's how it's going to impact our design. And as a training provider, we build beautiful programs, whether they're e-learning, video-based, instructor-led, blended. If it is hosted with us, we can tell you scores, time spent, completion rates. We can take a look at the pre-test versus final test. That's the biggest kind of indicator of whether knowledge has been gained, right? They see the same questions at the same types of questions at the pre-test as the final test, and you say, okay, they got a 30%, and then by the end of the program they got 100% or 70% or 80%. You're showing measurable outcome. And then of course survey results, as far as how is this program performing from a user perspective. All of that we can do day in, day out. But ROI is not that. And so when we get this question, I have to say up front, like, ROI is internal on your end. So, and it's not like an email marketing platform or a marketing automation platform, right? Training is different. Every training program is different. With an email marketing or marketing automation platform, you are able to clearly say, okay, we did some A/B testing, we sent out these emails, click-through rate, the actual conversion rate, the sale, it goes all the way down the funnel. But with training, your KPIs are going to be different for every single program. So if it's a fraud awareness program that you're running, your ROI is going to be proven on your fraud loss rate, right? Loss prevention, the value of the prevented fraud, fraud detection rate by your employees, time to escalate suspicious activity. If you do any social engineering simulations, what are the failure rates? The percent of fraud cases identified internally versus externally. So you want to be able to say, as a result of the fraud awareness training this year, fraud losses declined 14%. Phishing simulation failure rates fell from 22% to 7%. Average escalation time improved from 2.4 days to same day reporting. That is ROI. For an AML program, you would be looking at your SAR quality scores, your SAR rejection rework rates, your alert backlog volume, the tracking your investigators' productivity, the average hours they're working per case. For sanctions training, it would be, how they're handling false positives, or are they missing true matches? So the data that we're able to, work with is limited, but we especially with the pre-test and final tests, we can tell a good story. But the ROI is really something that is handled on your end internally. And it all goes back to, okay, why are you releasing this program in the first place? And how are you going to be measuring success? So that's a key question we get a lot that we did want to kind of clarify and cover for those that it might be relevant for. All right, we will move on to the next.
Okay, so, sorry, I don't see it moved on my end. So finally, let's talk about something that almost every compliance team faces, which is doing more with less. So teams are constantly, understaffed. The internal tools and processes they have, it's hard to always keep up with them. For many organizations, the challenge is that the training programs weren't built to adapt as quickly as everything is changing. And the content development cycles are long, and the review and approval process internally are often very slow. And so by the time that the course is, finalized and launched and ready for everyone to take, there's a very good chance that, depending on the topic, sanctions as an example, it's going to need to be updated. So it's very, very hard for small teams to keep up with everything that's going on, especially when it comes to compliance training, and the world that we're in today, where everything is changing across all the major topics that need to be covered. So AML, sanctions, transaction monitoring, you name it. There's changes all the time that impact these trainings, so they constantly need to be updated and updated quickly. So we'll go ahead and talk through some few best practices that can be put in place to overcome these challenges.
So exactly, a lot of our clients are coming to us for help because of one of these three reasons, right? They either don't lack, they lack the staff to be able to doing everything internally, or internally their skills or their development process is such that it just takes so long to release anything, and this is kind of an ASAP request. So one of the things that we do internally here, and I recommend to everyone, is to kind of, again, take a step back and look at your team and look at your tools. So new tools out there, I mentioned it before, Articulate. It used to be that in order to build an e-learning program, and we're just going to focus on e-learning here because of the development process in particular, it used to be that you had to have an instructional designer, a graphic designer, an animator, a video developer, if that was relevant, an e-learning developer, so actual coding, a QA specialist, and a project manager. So 7 key resources. And forget about even the subject matter experts, legal and compliance to review, all the stakeholders. A lot of cooks in the kitchen to develop a simple 30-minute, 1-hour course. And it would take to develop a 1-hour course 4 months to release. And there was the storyboarding process, there's all the different, alpha, beta, gold reviews. Articulate, when it came out years ago, and it's constantly improving, and I feel like I should be getting commission from them because of how much I recommend them, but you don't have to have someone coding. You don't necessarily have to have a graphic designer. You do need experts to write the content. You need an instructional designer to be, mapping out treatments. But the upskilling your team on some of these tools is very low effort and very high reward, and cross-training members. So in a past life, I ran a production team of 25 resources. When I came in, they were all very much siloed. When I left, they were all completely cross-trained. Have your graphic designers be taking QA, or instructional design courses, and vice versa. Because if someone in graphic design has an eye for what QA is going to be looking for, that's going to cut down time. So, our head of creative, she is now a web developer and e-learning developer. She's a whiz in Storyline, in Articulate Storyline and Rise. She's also a graphic designer. She can look out for it all as she's working on programs. So this means that you don't need such a big team, and you don't need so many cooks in the kitchen. Everybody is looking out for the same things, and you can be working a lot more agile by upskilling your team and cross-training them and using these more modern tools. Someone in a question mentioned Beyond, which makes me so happy. Beyond is an amazing tool. You can now do video development without having to pay, hundreds of thousands of dollars for production. So it's, looking into these tools. So I would recommend Articulate and Beyond. Articulate also has the ability to collaborate, to have, folks that are stakeholders to review. They can be annotating with comments. You can track all the versions. It's very, very intuitive. And so it has helped us to pump out a lot more with our clients and move things quicker. People are shocked when they say, oh, we'd like to develop a new custom course, 30 minutes on privacy. And we're like, okay, that's going to be about 2 weeks. And they're like, what? And it's because we are working smarter, not harder, because our team is cross-trained and we are using the latest tools. They're going to help us and help you to move faster. The other piece I'll get to, which I kind of provide as a little guidance up front to help our clients, is managing the stakeholder experience. Setting very clear expectations up front, because while we say 2 weeks, it ends up often being 4 weeks because of reviewer timeframes. So setting expectations that, yes, we still want a couple rounds of feedback, right? We want you to take a look at everything, make sure you're happy with it. We want to implement any changes you send us. So we do alpha, beta, and gold reviews. But we say at the alpha stage, this is where we want all your changes. This is where we want everybody involved. Legal and compliance should not be looking at it at the end. They should be looking at it at the beginning. And then we get all your feedback from the alpha version, all the cooks in the kitchen contributing. We implement it. Then it goes to beta, to a smaller group of stakeholders, confirming that the alpha feedback has been implemented. This is not where you want to be introducing material new changes. The beta is to really, you can make some small text tweaks, all of that, but we're really, to keep within timeframes, we would say to our reviewers, this is for you to confirm you're happy. And then they say, oh, a couple tweaks. There's always a couple tweaks. Oh, a couple tweaks here and there. Then we go for gold final review and say, okay, this is really for testing, making sure everything's working perfectly. So when we kind of set that expectation up front, we select our stakeholders, and be more careful with who we're selecting and when they're seeing things. It really helps us in the end to be delivering things faster. And, time is money. So that helps with a lot when it comes to budget. Alrighty. Well, that pretty much concludes what we wanted to share with you as far as some of the key pain points we're seeing. Natalie, did you have anything else that you wanted to mention?
No, I think we covered it all. We are seeing a lot of challenges, but as Lauren walked us through, there's a lot of great ways now to overcome those challenges. So it's an exciting time to be in the space.
Absolutely. Okay, my favorite part, Q&A. So we got a question from Christina Turner. So let's pop it up so that we can all see it. How scalable is the pre-testing model for large organizations over 30,000 employees? Totally scalable. So typically a course has a test, so think a final test. Think about how scalable that is. It's the same exact thing, it's just at the top. It's at the beginning of the experience. So you can be designing a course that starts off with a pre-test, and then it would typically be 2 separate modules. So say in your learning management system, you would have a pre-test and there would be a dependency built in, and all this is very simple. The LMS administrator can configure this. They go on into the pre-test, they take the pre-test, and there's logic that says, okay, if they pass, they don't need to take the course, it's completed. Mm-hmm. If they don't pass, it unlocks the course, and then they go into the course and the final test. So just like e-learning is scalable, the pre-test is very scalable. And sometimes we even do this oftentimes we do this even ahead of instructor-led programs to confirm knowledge before they're entering the classroom, that everyone's got the same foundation. If it's missing, they have to take a, kind of a pre-work before entering the classroom. So hopefully that answers your question. It's very, very simple, very scalable. Oftentimes our final tests, we develop them as 20 questions, and then 10 will, like say for example, for a 30-minute course, 20 question final test bank, 10 questions are pulled from it randomly. So for the pre-test, we'll just duplicate the same final test. 10 questions are pulled randomly. And so very, very simple to be releasing. Next question from Anonymous. This is anecdotal, but I feel as if in an effort to increase engagement, people have been turning to items like theming, gamification, embedding programs like Beyond in their learnings. Just curious on your thoughts on these. So yes, this is one of my biggest pet peeves over the years has been the word gamification. Like 15 years ago, it was all about mobile learning, mobile training and learning. No one wants to take training on their mobile device, and then it became, gamification. This helps with recall, this and that. I personally don't think adults need to play games to be learning. There's other ways to have a thoughtful, engaging learning experience, but serious games can, there are ways to, so for example, for our instructor-led programs, like specifically for our sanctions instructor-led program, for sometimes we have these 2-day deep into sanctions programs on Iran, North Korea, China, Russia. It can be very heavy to be talking about this for 2 days. So we do include games. We like to start off the first day with trivia, just to get people talking, get people engaged. Now this is classroom. Just to kind of paint the picture for facilitation, we start off with trivia to kind of gauge the level of knowledge in the room. And then on the second day, when we've kind of finished the majority of the crux of the core sanctions programs, we do Jeopardy. And this is an interactivity we've developed in Storyline, but we run locally in the classroom. And we split people up into teams, and it's, based on the 4 sanctions programs, for example, we do a game of Jeopardy, and it keeps people awake, coming back from lunch. And so there is a time and place for games. It's about the way you brand it and everything. I am not a fan of cartoons. I don't think anyone is really. I think at the end of the day, if your organization, if your brand is animated, if it is colorful, if it is if cartoons fit, 100% do it. But if your organization is not, it's got to fit your culture, your look and feel for your company. It's got to reflect that. It can't just be, oh, this is the latest thing, so we're going to release a game everyone should take. So a lot of times it can end up looking a little bit hokey. But I do love Beyond. I will say Beyond, it's so fast to be able to create even just animated text videos. We used Beyond, it was years ago now, but for a fun program, we created a trivia-like animated video that was actually put in elevator banks for a large firm, where people, you've got a captive audience in the elevator, and the elevator had TVs, and we put on a TV, like, what's the difference, what's a Chinese wall? And A would be like monument you could see from space. B would be, siloing two parts of business or whatever. And then the right answer would animate. And then it would say, if you didn't get this right, time to take this training course that was just released, just awareness things. So Beyond can be really fun. It's very easy to use, but you don't need to do the cartoons. You can actually use stock videos with text animation and all that to make it more photorealistic and resonate more with your brand and your corporate branding guidelines. So you can tell I'm a chatter. I could go on forever. Let's see. Claudia wrote, from your experience, when you have an audience that has different levels of knowledge and understanding about core topics, or if there is high rotation in an institution, what would be an effective approach for presentations or for implementing these resources? Different levels of knowledge and understanding about core topics. I would say in general, when you have, an organization that has different levels of knowledge, it's implementing these dependencies, and it's implementing this goes back to the training framework, kind of the laddered approach where everyone needs to take, the foundations, offer a chance to test out for those that are more tenured, but be looking at these folks that are more experienced and providing them with more, hands-on, perhaps instructor-led live training sessions. So it goes back to the training needs assessment and looking at your people. I think recognizing that you have these different levels of knowledge, still be holding bigger instructor-led programs. But like I said earlier, be doing a pre-test and making sure that everyone has the same level, because you don't want people coming to a webinar, virtual instructor-led session or instructor-led in person, and those that are not as experienced kind of dragging things down or not getting things out that they should, whereas those that are more experienced are, kind of waiting for that golden nugget, like I often am. So I think that that's a great awareness that you have there for your audience, and it's time to then take a look at curating an experience, looking at those different levels and seeing how you can kind of fit that in a thoughtful way. Let's see. Next one from Besma. Tools we recommend for measuring the effectiveness of an AML sanctions e-learning designed for all bank employees, not only the compliance department. So yeah, this is what we do all the time. So when it comes to, we have off-the-shelf AML CFT course, we have off-the-shelf sanctions courses, and our clients, take them, and typically off the shelf or customized. When it comes to proving effectiveness, that's where the pretest comes in, showing the knowledge gained, like we mentioned. But then it's also in, we don't just put out an annual foundational AML program. We then do, intermediate. We have follow-on. We have a CDD KYC module. We have a transaction monitoring module for sanctions. We have a sanction screening module. We have, kind of upping the level of knowledge with each, and reducing the duration for each as it gets into more intermediate and advanced topics. And it's, kind of moving them along that journey, for all, starting off with all bank employees, but then kind of whittling it down to specific cohorts. And as far as proving effectiveness, it's what we talked about earlier. It's the completion rates, it's the test scores, it's the pre-test versus the final test, and survey results. But if you're thinking about effectiveness when it comes to ROI, it's kind of the main points that we outlined earlier for AML and sanctions. Like we're talking SARS, we're talking, false positives, true matches. So that is more on the internal side. I think that concludes all the questions. Someone said in the chat, just not sure if our LMS has a functionality to auto-assign the course to people who didn't pass the test. I'm not sure which LMS you're on, but most of them can. It's just the way that it's configured in the learning management system. Typically, if you have a Cornerstone, Saba, SuccessFactors, Oracle, all of them, Degreed, all of them have dependencies, is what they call it, that you can put in place, where if someone, you just have to have them in as two separate modules. So hopefully that helps. And we're right up on time. We didn't even time this ahead of time. And it worked out perfectly. Well, thank you all so much for your questions. We're not going to be sharing the slides from today because we have actually developed and if I may say so myself, beautiful report that is going to be available to you and sent to you in our follow-up thank you email tomorrow. And it basically outlines all of these best practices as 2 different checklists. The first more focused on strategy and culture and training needs assessment, and the second focused on design and development. So hopefully you got value out of today's session and can check out the report. We'll also be hosting a webinar next week on FATF, like I mentioned. So hopefully we'll see you again soon. But thank you all again for your time. You can tell we love talking about this subject because it's what we live and breathe. If you have any other follow-up questions or anything, feel free to reach out to us. And yeah, we really appreciate your time and hope you gain value. So thank you.
Thank you.